Hello all, welcome to another harder endgame study from the Solving Harder Studies to Improve Chess Calculation series. This composition comes from the Ukrainian chess composer Filip Bondarenko. It's a very interesting one. I think it will require a lot of deep calculation, deep visualization. It's going to pay off the effort. And as always, I suggest you watch the guide if you haven't. The countdown, the main one, will start with 10 minutes, and I catch you back with a solution. And let's go for the solution. This time I won't show you the first good move. Let's just see what is going on over the board. So, black is threatening to promote a pawn, but we have our bishop controlling it. And on the other side, the king is threatening to take one pawn, then moving our pawn up until it reaches a queen. So, this is similar to a pawn race, although there will be need for black to use this intermediate move to force the bishop to take the pawn and then bring the king, take the bishop, and then advancing the h5 pawn. So this is more or less the pawn race. So let's start by that. Let's go with one move, then two, three, four, five, six. This is a technique that we should use without moving pieces. It's counting them down. Although, of course, over the board we are not able to color the square, so make it easier for us to see what is going on. But it's an important technique, so you should count it without using the colors. But okay, let's use it now so you understand better what's going on. And of course, on the other side, we will have these two moves. So we will need, of course, after the king takes the pawn advance promotes to the queen, forcing the bishop to take the pawn, and then I advance the king, controlling the escape square from the bishop. So the bishop will be doomed. And so let's go again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for white. And after these two moves, 1, 2, 3, the king will take the bishop and reach the corner, and then one more and three more. So six moves, I will have a pawn over here and a king over here. So in the end, let me just use colors of the different colors. So I will have the king on b7 and the queen on c8, and I will have on the other side the king on h1 and the pawn on h2. So this will be our target position if we are going to a pawn race. And after here, we see that the king is in front of the pawn, and I will have to use my king, of course, to reach the other two pawns. Otherwise, it won't be able to win the game. So let's count them down. So let's say the king comes here. Now the king escapes from the corner, so threatening to promote the pawn, which forces our queen to go and control that promotion. Of course, now black promotes, the queen takes the promoted queen, and the king comes back again to the corner. So our king is on c6 and the enemy king on the corner. So we approach again the pawns. Sorry, we approach again the pawns, and the king moves to g2 again. So you need to visualize all this. This is part of the practice. Now we can't go over here. Notice that the pawn is controlling that square, which forces white to go to e5. It's the only move. But now the king takes our pawn in f3, so we need to take the other pawn. The king takes f2, and so we take the last one, and it's a draw. We just remain with the kings. So as you can see, the position having our pieces already advances to this, it's already on the sixth move, and we are still calculating in our mind and visualizing what's everything is going on. The other possibility over here is, let's say the queen takes the pawn. So for example, we start to see that one. Now the king gets away from the corner. Let's do this with the different colors again, so it becomes a bit easier for you to understand what's going on. So the king comes to g2. So next move will promote the pawn. Of course, the queen can take the other pawn, but now we promote to the queen. The queen can come and, for example, check our king, but now the king goes to f1. Yes, we have two extra pawns, but it's impossible to win with an open queen, and it will be checks everywhere, and won't be possible for white to win from there. So we more or less need to reach all this deep to discard the taking the pawn in advance. So we start to look to other moves. Let's say, for example, we move the bishop first to h1. Then black, of course, will go with the king to h3. Notice that over here, black is only having one or two moves, but going to the other way around doesn't help nothing. It takes a lot of time. Then white just goes ahead with the plan. If the king tries to help, it's impossible. We just need to count moves. So let's say, for example, one move over here, forget that the king starts first, okay, one move, then we move there, the king comes here, now we reach the pawn, the king and when the king reaches this close, we have these three squares control, so we are going to promote to a queen, so that is not going to help. So let's go back with starting with the bishop to h1. So the king goes to h3, so this is also a possibility. Now, for example, we take the pawn, and now black advances the h4 pawn. If you were expecting black to move the queen, the king up and down, you are wrong. So what's going to happen is the king will be over here. Let's use the other color again. And there will be a pawn over here. Here we can't go because white pawn is controlling the same here. And now the bishop that it's on the corner, it's controlling g2. And the king has another pawn. There's no more moves for black. So the idea is the bishop comes, the king comes. I take the pawn advances, and there's no way to avoid the stalemate draw. And so that's more or less the deep introduction for this one. And how can we solve it? Well, it's not easy. Let's confirm everything. Let's go with the king taking the pawn. So now it's black to play, and we already saw it's a mistake. So it forces us to go to the corner. Then the king goes to, we are counting these moves like we did in our head. And notice now we reached the desired position. So we already knew that we were going to reach over here. So now it's white to play. And let's say we move the king. The same goes with the queen. We already talked about this possibility. So the queen taking one pawn, allowing the promotion of the pawn without any taking over again. So now check, and this is a draw position. But let's see the king going after the pawns. It's going to be the thing we talk about. The king moves to g2. Now the queen needs to control the promotion of the pawn, so needs to come to h8. We now force the queen to trade as black. Now we approach the pawns, but as you can see, it's going to happen a draw. No way to escape this one. So we were right thinking in our mind that taking the pawn is not possible. So what is the first good move? We still are trying to find out the first move. That's not easy. And first move is the brilliant one, to go with the bishop to the corner. Hey, but what is going on? Haven't I told you that this is going to create a stalemate? Maybe, I don't know. Let's say what happens. So the king comes and plays king h3 as expected. So next move is going to play h4, and we are facing a stalemate. So this is the first position after this long introduction. So you can think again, another minute for you. You can pause for more to find out what is now the continuation from white that also avoids black going into a stalemate position. And here we are. And now, yes, I'm going to show you the brilliant move, which is to go pawn c3. Who would imagine what's going on over here? Pawn c3. Why not going directly then with pawn c4? Well, the idea is simple. As I already mentioned, black will play, of course, h4. So the king now has no squares to move, and there are no moves for black. So if the king takes the pawn, it's game over. It's a draw by stalemate. So let's say the king goes to a7 to avoid the taking the pawn. So the pawn now is free. Of course, black now sacrificed the pawn with b5. So if we accept the same stalemate, so we need to advance. And of course, if we advance, then black also advances, and we get a draw over here. So this is not possible. What else? If we are not able to play c4, let's say we go with, for example, the king to the corner immediately. Well, this doesn't change much. So black will now advance the b5, the b pawn to b5. We now are forced. Notice that we are not able now to go with c4. Otherwise, it's going to be black to win. So we need to go to c3 force. Of course, now black offers again the pawn. So if we take, it's a stalemate again after h4. So any move, unless we are wanting to do some kamikaze lost over here, we are not going to be able to avoid the stalemate draw. And so over here, if the pawn advances, we are already forced to take. Otherwise, we are going to lose. Okay, so we already saw that the way white played was c3. And of course, we are going to get the magical move from black, h4. And now another opportunity for you. It's again white to play. Find the next move. I see you after this short countdown. And let's go back. We already know that we need to allow black to make some moves. So, of course, here, moving the pawn just stalemate. So we need to move the king. So the king has some options, but not that logical. And probably you are wondering, okay, let's go with the king a7. But this doesn't work also. Why? Because black now can move the b pawn, of course, before. But now it's white to move. What can you do over here? If you move the king, the pawn will advance again. If you move the pawn, black is going to win. So we need to move the king. The pawn advance. So if I accept the pawn, which I am forced now to accept not to lose the game, then it's a draw. And so it's a stalemate draw. Black can't move and it's not check. So this doesn't move. So what is the right move? And the right move is to go with king b5. And we start to wonder, okay, what's going on again? And as always, of course, black needs to move the pawn. So only one move, c6. And it's time for you to think again. And we will resume with the final continuation for the study. It's almost over. It's almost over. And now I'm going directly to the good continuation, which is to go with the king to c4 exclamation mark. Of course, now black is going to advance the pawn to b5 check, but now it's all going to make sense because we are going to see what is, after all, the main idea from white since the beginning of the moving of the king. So the king goes to d3, the pawn advances. Of course, I can't accept the pawn, otherwise it will be stalemate, but I have new ideas. I go with the king to e2, whatever the pawn does, if it takes or advance, it's the same thing, because now I am going with the king to f1, and suddenly, ta-da, I'm going to checkmate and win this one using the poor position of the queen that was there, the king was there to have a stalemate, and suddenly it's checkmate instead, and white comes up on top. Hope you have enjoyed this one. It's a deep one, and I spent a bit of time on the beginning of the explanation, but I hope the effort also pays for you and more entertainment. And I see you again, as always, in future videos. Bye bye.